This is just one example. Now it's recorded. So, as I told you, it doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. But obviously, guys, please take this into consideration. The important message in here, from an economic perspective, it doesn't make sense. We are not economists or only finance gurus. We need to take holistic approaches to everything. You are scientists. So yes, the problem of the book says that, but you have to analyze, because this is if you put yourself into an enterprise environment, what are the questions that could potentially be provided? Like, would you just only reject the budget for the commercial team because it doesn't make sense from an economic perspective? What if I tell you to analyze the strategic perspective or the commercial perspective? What are we not analyzing in here? Because this is just an economic variable. Maybe there are not economic related variables. What if it increases your brand awareness? What if you increase the market share? What if you increase production in order to take out one competitor? Do you think that companies don't do that? Do you think that Big Cola wanted to get out from the market? Okay, for example, in Mexico, you won't find any more Big Cola. So what happened? There are more variables in all the analysis that we do. And I wanted to explain this because, yes, the book says that, but I wouldn't take decisions based in this. Yes, it's an important factor. You leave it as it is, but obviously, holistic approach. You need to understand the commercial aspect, the strategic aspect. Maybe it has another purpose. So from the economic approach, and that's why I started the question with this, yes, it doesn't make sense. I wouldn't go from the economic perspective. So what is the profit impact if RBC can use higher quality raw materials, thus increasing variable cost per unit by $10 to generate an increase in unit sales from 500 to 580? In here, we would need a variable cost. So let's take a look at, take this as variable cost, guys. The 150,000 per 500 units. So our new CM per unit is not going to be 190, right? It was 180 if you did the math that I told you, and it's a little bit harder to solve it, but this is how we solve it. So we have our original scenario of 500 units, the first one. This obviously it gives us $20,000 of operating income, and if we reduce this at 580 units, we could take 580 units. Those 580 units will give us our sales. That's a data from the question before, and the variable cost per unit, it's in the upper side in the blue square. So it gives us 179,000. It was only for you to analyze the increase in the units and if it makes sense to increase it. You were subtracting $10 of your CM, subtracting for higher quality materials, but you increased the amount of sales. What we are just figuring out is if that decision makes sense. So you have the P&L. As you might see, you are lowering down from 320 of variable cost to 310, the unit cost of variable expenses, but the increase in units sold, obviously, as you're watching in the net operating margin, it increased by 10,200. And if you're watching, it's 1/3 of increase. So that makes sense, no? Lower down your contribution margin by $10, but increasing the level of sales for 80 units because you sacrifice margin in order to have higher quality. That is a very common case. We can even go a little bit further with the example. We can cut prices. We can increase advertising budgets for the month. Increase sales, but I think you got the point. So Coffee Clutch has an average selling price of a cup of coffee of $1.99, and the average variable expense is 36 cents. So the average fixed expense per month is 1,300, and the average cups sold per month are 2,100. So what is the break-even sales dollars? The total amount of sales. Remember the contribution margin ratio? Remember that we need to equal the contribution margin to the fixed expense. So what is the contribution margin? 75%, no? Contribution margin ratio, 75%. How did I get the 75%? How do you get the contribution margin ratio, guys?
You subtract the sales minus the variable expenses. And well, the sales were 1.49.
That gives you the contribution margin, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the contribution margin, you have to divide it by the amount of sales, and that's the
75%. That's it.
Yeah.
And the contribution margin has to be the same as the fixed expenses. You can just change fixed expenses and put it like contribution margin, but it has to be the same. So it's 1,300. You just divide that and it gives you the, well, it doesn't give you exactly the ones if you leave all the digits. But if you round it, it gives you, or the closer choice was 1,715. So you have 1.49 US dollars per cup less the variable cost. It gives you $1.13 per cup of contribution margin. Divide that against 1.49 and it will give you the 75.8%. Now let's make that for units. How many units do I need to sell in order to break even? What did you do, Adriana?
My answer was 1,150. And I did fixed expense, which is 1,300 over the unit contribution margin, which is 1.49 minus 0.36, and then I divided that, and that's it.
Yep, exactly.
I got the same. I mean, it's basically the same. I just took 1,715 and divided it by $1.59 because that's the number we needed to break even.
Oh yeah. I did as we didn't knew the break even, the break even volume. Yeah, easier. If we now know how to achieve zero, let's do it on how to achieve a certain goal. can you do it for, I want this level of profits, so I need to sell this amount? Yeah, the answer, targeted profit plus fixed expenses. That was the only thing. If we want to break even, fixed expenses divided by the contribution margin rate. But if we want to target certain goal, it's the targeted plus the fixed expenses. We are just missing one more definition, one more concept, which is to determine the margin of safety. The margin of safety, it's very easy to explain, is the margin of safety is the excess of budget or actual sales dollars over the break-even volume of sales dollars. It is the amount by which sales can drop before losses are incurred. The higher the margin of safety, the lower the risk of not breaking even and incurring in losses. Margin of safety in dollars equals total sales minus break-even sales. Easy equation. So why is this important? Because it's not the same as having a margin of safety of 100% compared to a 3% of margin of safety. And why is that? Because it means that if your budget is off of just around 3%, you will have the possibility of incurring in losses. This is an example. If we assume that RBC has actual sales of 250,000, given that we already determined the break-even sales to be 200,000, the margin of safety is 50,000 as shown. Okay, so per unit, we don't have to figure it out. It's in the upper side, 400 units. This is the break-even point that we determined before. So the margin of safety is the budget that we took in the 500 units. That's the budget. So it's just a matter of subtracting the budget minus the break-even level of sales. That's your margin of safety. And what you can do is you can get margin of safety rate. So 50,000 divided by 250,000, it will give you a rate. What's the amount for that rate? 20%. So you have a margin of safety of 20%. It is an important ratio as you can be off your budget by 20%. Regarding the sales, what if the margin of safety were less? And like for this increase in units, you would have only 2,000 of increased operating income. Yes, you have an economic aspect of increasing the profits. It is economically viable, but if you increase by 100 units and instead of achieving net operating income of 20,000, you modify that, erase that in your minds, and instead of achieving 20,000, you achieved 2,000, would you accept increasing the level of units? Instead of 20,000, imagine yourself like in the position where you achieve an increase of 2,000 of net operating income. Would you accept that project?
Yes.
Why?
Because you're still above the point where, wait, no. Because you're still above the point where you're not losing.
Okay, that's the answer I hope for, but it's the incorrect one.
No. Okay, so no.
No, important thing in here is, yeah, from an economic perspective, it's viable. It's viable. You can do it. It is profitable. But what are you not taking into consideration to achieve that level of profit? What variable are we missing? With a certain amount of returns, you have a certain amount of risk. Would you think that you would accept that amount of risk? If you take the units, the net operating profit for 2,000 of net operating income by increasing 100 of units, what would happen to your net operating income per unit? It will lower down, no? You will win much less per unit. You are decreasing your ratios, decreasing your earnings. And what if you increase fixed expenses? If you increase fixed expenses, that it's very probable if you want to achieve more operation, by increasing fixed expenses, you will have more risk, because if you are off your budget, you will incur in losses. Remember that budgets are just mathematical models, but sometimes they are not that accurate. So you will have to take obviously into consideration level of risk, level of earnings. So guys, with this data, please determine the level of safety, margin of safety, sorry. Now you know that the margin of safety is the budget less the total, the break-even level of sales, right? You just have to get the budgeted amount. Tell me the level of sales and the level of COPS. The break-even was 1,715, no? We know that.
Yeah, but
and what's the actual amount? Yes.
You multiply 2,100 by 1.49, and then
that's the answer of total amount of sales. How many cups?
1,414 times 1.40.
Divided.
See, that's where I got lost.
Divided, not multiply. Now you guys know how to break even, how to target a profit, and what's your margin of safety. Risk is measured by the amount of accuracy in your projections. Okay? So how would you know the level of accuracy? It's determined by the level of variance. Do you know what is variance and standard deviation? It simply means a very easy way to understand it is wait, let's share this whiteboard. So it simply means that if you are targeting a net profit of 1,000 and the results that you get is 900 or 85 or 1,050, this variation against what you were trying to achieve will obviously result in a variance. Basically, the risk is measured of the accuracy in your projections. That's how we measure risk. Remember the scenario analysis that we did? Like modifying the level of sales, it modified all the results that we get. Those are these scenarios. That is how you calculate the level of variance and the level of risk. So that's it, guys.